fighting to be heard and fighting for answers.
Now, most counties have a dedicated team to work cold cases, but that is not the case in Kent County.
We have not had a cold case unit for over 12 years.
How many parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, children are still waiting for answers? And while we wait, there's no one working. My mom is Barbara McClure, and she's been missing for 46 years. There are people that are here right now that know exactly what happened that night.
What you are about to hear is definitely a cold case that should not be a cold case, should never even be where it is at today, 46 years later. And Jaime is the number one reason why anybody is even finding out about her mother's case, hands down. Take a second to listen to Jaime, and it's going to take some time, so be patient. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and pay Jaime the respect to listen to her mother's story, because as she's going to tell you, somebody knows something. Somebody knows what happened to her mother 46 years ago, and you guys really do have the ability to make a difference in this case, because somebody knows, and somebody knows somebody that knows. So if that's the case, somebody needs to step up. We're going to get into all of that. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jaime.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. Everybody that follows me knows that if I'm involved with a family member and or a case in general, there's an element to it that is different, very different. And we'll get into that. But go ahead, introduce yourself. Get into your mom's case and so forth, and just it's your stage, it's your voice.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate you being involved. I'm Jaime Stupi. Barbara McClure is my mother, and she has been missing for over 46 years, and she would have actually just had her 72nd birthday a couple days ago.
46 years without a answer, without not knowing, nothing whatsoever. You have become a champion in your mom's case. You are literally the only reason your mom's case is even talked about today. So let's set the stage for your mother's disappearance. Everybody that's listening to this and that is going to watch this, let's pull them into who Barbara was.
So it was November 2nd, 1978, which is 10 days before my second birthday. To give a little bit of a 10-second background, she was planning a big party for me. She was telling people that I was going to have the best Christmas ever. So certainly showed signs of not walking away. On November 2nd, she wanted to go out and decided to go to a disco to practice dancing with a gentleman that she had dated in the past. And he picked her up, and they drove to Fandango Disco in Lake City in the Seattle area. And they were there for not very long when things just started to not go right. They weren't dancing well together. And Scott got frustrated, the guy she was with, and he decided to leave. And there are some speculation that there was a fight. According to Scott, there was not a fight, but he abruptly got up and pulled his jacket off a chair, which made it fall back, so maybe created a scene. So unfortunately, haven't spoken to anybody else that was actually there that night to know different. And he left, and very shortly after that, supposedly, my mom decided that she was going to walk home. And a couple that was with them that night, said that they saw her. Some things say at the gas station on Lake City Way, and the police reports say they think she went missing where Sheridan Beach, which is 165th, and Lake City Way meet. That was basically her last known location.
So with that, we have your mother, who is 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
She's young. She is sort of single at the time. You're 2 years old. You're with a babysitter that night. She goes out to a dance with her dance partner where, this is her thing. She dances competitively and so forth. And she went to the Fandango disco in Lake Forest Park, which is a really nice northern suburb of Seattle. It also has a police station in the parking lot, and still does to this day.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Fandango disco is not there anymore. It's a city hall now. But she goes to this dance, like you described, with her sort of, her dance partner, who she was also intimately involved with sort of prior, but kind of called it off, right? She kind of called that off with Scott prior, but she was still like dancing with him and hanging out. So she goes to the disco. She goes with her roommate's boyfriend, I guess you could say, and Scott, right?
She goes, so it's her roommate. It's Scott picks my mom up, and then it's Scott's roommate and his girlfriend. There were also other people there, which I have never heard before, but Scott has told me that there were the Wynn brothers that were there that I had never heard of that were there also. So that's kind of the crowd that they were with. Scott and my mom were there first and early before the music started, which to me is really important because he said, I can't remember if it started at 8 or 9, the music. Typically it would have started at 9, supposedly, but they were there before that because they wanted to practice on the dance floor before everybody else started dancing. So for timeline wise, I think that's kind of important.
Yeah, definitely. So it's late at night. They get into an argument, which is sort of, we're kind of gearing it towards, it was a normal argument, disagreement whatsoever. They weren't kind of vibing or whatever that may be. He grabs his coat, he turns over a chair, walks out, and he goes to another bar, which is near his home. So Lake Forest Park, to give everybody a perspective, is a northern suburb of Seattle. It's kind of, I don't know exactly how much, it's about 7-8 miles out of the city center north, right? It's like the last neighborhood before you get to Snohomish County, sort of. And then Scott lives like on the Snohomish County, King County line, which is where I-5 and the I-405 intersect and turn into Snohomish County. This bar that he left and went to was near his house. He then goes to the bar. Nobody's really there. And then he knows the bartender or whatever and decides to then go back to the Fandango disco where he left Barbara, and then discovers that she's no longer there. You want to pick it up from there?
Sure. So when he says he left the Overland Express in Linwood, which is easily a 20-minute drive or so, and comes back to Fandango's and expects that because my mom had told him, I will just have Brenda, her roommate, take me home. So in other words, Scott, you're free to leave, kind of please leave. It's kind of how I look at it. And so when he comes back, he is expecting that my mom and Brenda are gone. And when he comes back, he says that Brenda is still there and he's upset. And he says, well, where's Barbara? And she says, oh, she decided to walk home. But she says, don't worry about it because Lou Crawford and Arlene, who we're dating, are headed home. Arlene lived that direction as my mom as well. And they are going to pick her up and take her home. So don't worry about it. That's kind of the understanding of how the parting went.
So let's catch people up. So
Yeah.
now we've mentioned Lou Crawford and
Mhm.
Arlene.
Mhm.
So let's keep everybody in tune with the case. You know, we have your mom, Barbara McClure, 24 years old, who has vanished this night, has never been seen since November 2nd of 1978. She was alleged to have walked away. She was with Scott, her dance partner, her ex-lover, her roommate, and then Lou, that you just mentioned, was
Mhm.
actually Scott's roommate.
Scott's roommate.
So
yes.
so we have Scott's roommate and his girlfriend, sort of, whatever you want to put a label on that.
Mhm.
And what is significant about them that's going to happen next? Because this is where, you know, everybody that knows your mom's story knows, you know, what's been presented by the media. But there's
Mhm.
different versions of what happened. I don't want you to get into what your work has discovered.
Okay.
Let's get into what everybody knows,
Okay.
face value, that's
Yep.
been released by King County and all that. What happens after Lou and Arlene leave?
So they leave. The police report says they leave and they are driving down the road and they see my mom on the side of the road and they pull over and they try to convince her to get in the car. And she says, nope, I want to walk. Leave me alone, basically. And they leave. And supposedly that is the last time anybody that has anything to do with my mom has ever laid their eyes on her.
That's the most significant part up to this point in the case, is
Mhm.
that this is the last sighting of your mom.
It is. I
Why
well,
do
I
you
feel
think why do you think your mom didn't want to get in the car?
Well, what I know of her is she's stubborn. I'm not sure where I got that. I I feel like what I've always done with that information in my mind is if that was my friend, I would have stayed there with her. So if I'm not going to let this woman walk almost 5 miles on her own down this road. You know, has she been drinking? Not a ton, but all reports say a drink or two. And I would have, my thought has always been, why would you just drive away? You just left her there. You just said, okay, fine. And just left. I would not do that as a friend or as not even a friend. I wouldn't let anybody do that. That's how I've always felt.
In a lot of cases that I've been involved with. And it's very sad because people go out with people and they don't return with people.
Mm-hmm.
And typically when bad things happen, it's because of that. You know, if you go out with somebody, you stay with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's really key into, especially young people, young adults that are going somewhere, especially out partying or anywhere for that matter. If you go somewhere, you let somebody know where you're going. And if you're going with a group, you stick with the group. When groups get separated, things happen. And honestly, that is the single most important reason why we don't know what happened to your mom that night, is because
Yes.
there was a separation that happened that night when she was out with a group of friends. You know, whatever that may be, you know, until we find the where, we won't know the exact why. We can just speculate, but that is the principle behind your mother's disappearance. There was a separation between her, Scott, Lou, Barb, Arlene, you know, whoever else was there, the Wynn brothers, whoever else was there. She separated from the group. Beautiful, young, 24-year-old, full of energy, single mom that is out trying to just be a young adult and live her life and dance competitively. She was an amazing dancer, you know. When she decided to separate, or when they decided to separate from her, whatever that may have been, that was it. That was it. And when you open that door, somebody's going to walk through it. What that somebody is or something is, you know, we don't know, but we're going to get into what we think. Now, we've set the stage for everybody listening to this, which is, all right, your mom disappeared after she went dancing. She was with some people that she knew. She separated from them. Now she's missing. How was she discovered missing? When did family or friends know that, okay, well, Barbara's missing? Well, what happened from there?
So, uh, again, I'm assuming we're staying on the what's been
Yes.
reported side. So the
Yes.
next morning, Brenda comes home. So she had stayed out. This is her roommate, my mom's roommate. She had stayed out that night with someone, and she comes home. We don't know the exact time, though we've found out a little better, I think, but we don't know the exact time. And something told her something wasn't right. We don't know what, but she realized that my mom had not come home. So she then calls Scott and says, "Is Barb with you?" And he says no. And they proceed to, Scott comes to the house, and they, by about 9 o'clock, they knew her shift was either, she was supposed to be at work the next day because now it's a Friday. And they knew their shift either started at 8 or 9 because they always did one of those two times. And so they proceeded to wait until a little after 9 to call work and see if maybe she stayed out with someone, went home with a friend and spent the night. And so maybe she just went straight to work. And then they called work, called work again, maybe 45 minutes to an hour later, to check in one more time. And she was not there. And they then called the police station while they called the operator, who sent them somewhere, we believe to Lake City Police first, and then to Seattle PD, and then King County in that order. But they could not file a missing person report on her because they told them to call back when it had been 24 hours because she had not been missing long enough.
Okay, pause right there. It's important for people to understand that you do not have to wait 24 hours to report somebody missing. This was back before 911 was even implemented in King County. This was old school stuff that a lot of people hear. And actually, a lot of people live their lives thinking that if somebody goes missing, that you actually have to do that. You do not have to do that. And in doing that, you severely run the risk of never finding your loved one. You severely run the risk of not getting your loved one the help before something horrible happens. You don't have to wait 24 hours. So I just want to make sure I let people know that when they hear that, because that's not a reality at all.
Especially under the circumstances. So if your loved one walked out the front door and you don't know where they are, that might be a different situation. But with the stories that were given, she has walked down a major highway in the middle of the night and never been seen again. So the situation, the circumstances were already suspicious. Yeah.
And I know their attitude was, because you and I have already been through this, very, very intimately with the details in person and so forth. And we both know that she's an adult. The attitude was she's an adult. She's allowed to go missing. And that's true. I get that. And I have a lot of families that call me in active cases where that's still a thing. But that's where it's up to family members and friends to start documenting. If you think it does not add up, if you think it is suspicious, it is suspicious. And do not settle for law enforcement taking the attitude of they're an adult. Some agencies, there's just nothing, you're not going to get anywhere. That's the attitude they're going to take. They're overworked. They're busy. That's just what it is. You got to step up. You got to then start documenting everything. You got to start looking. You have to start contacting people. You have to start reaching out to people before things get too late. So let's switch gears now that I've summed that up, because it's important to educate people. Your process in this, and in any case, is a learning experience. And that's just the way it is. I don't know everything. I'm constantly learning. Every single search I do, every family that I work with, every single thing that I do, I'm learning something different because I keep the wheels open to absorb, more directions, take us from where your mother has now been missing. Nobody's heard from her. They start to realize she's missing. Things aren't adding up. What happens next?
So essentially, nobody knows anything that happened all day that day. Honestly, we have learned more now, or at least what we think. However, basically what happened is 10 p.m. that night, they call back to the police and then file a missing person report. Brenda files the missing person report. What we do know in that day for sure is that at some point,
and Brenda is
the roommate, her roommate.
Brenda is her roommate, who she stays with
Yes.
at the house.
Yes.
So Brenda calls the police and reports
Yep.
her missing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and reports her missing. So that's the first reported true of her missing. The other thing that did happen in that day, and I really don't know when, but at some point, so my mom's manager at the Olympic Hotel where she worked, which is also where Scott worked, which is also where, I mean, a lot of people that we knew worked there, that they knew, I should say. Her boss was actually a very close friend of the family. My grandfather had actually paid for the name is eluding me, but they're from Norway, and you had to pay for something to get them here. Anyways, so that well-known family friend went to Westgate Chapel, close to the family. So she, after my mom has not shown up to work and has gotten these frantic calls from the roommate and Scott, calls my grandparents and lets them know that she has not made it into work, and people don't know where she is. So we know that happened that day as well.
How do you feel about that?
I feel like there's a lot more to the story. I feel like there's way too many missing pieces that nobody documented in this time period that are clearly missing, because there's got to be more, right?
Right. And I say that because I want to strategically pique the interest of people that are listening to this, because there is so much more.
Yes.
So I'm trying to drop hints. I'm trying to lead this in a way that's going to make people understand, like, this is outrageous. It is shocking, and we're gonna lay it out there. Just be patient.
Yeah.
So what happens next? You know, she's missing now.
Yep.
Is there any phone calls from her? Does anybody see her? What happens?
There is literally nothing for days. There is what I know, because of the file, is that on Monday it ended up on King County desk. So it went from other police departments and it basically ended up on King County's desk. It was basically literally the first page of the file essentially says that they inherited this case, didn't want it, but they inherited it, and nothing. Nobody's looking. There's no searches. Nothing happens. And then on Thursday, November 8th, out of nowhere, in this remote, weird place, my mom's license is found. That's it. Just a license, nothing else.
Her license is found and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Where was it found?
It was found.
Oh, well, where was it found according to officials? We're still on the original narrative, the public narrative that has been driven.
It was found where the I-405 corridors meet in Snohomish County.
All right. And how far away is this from the disco?
It's about 10 miles. About 10 miles.
About 10 miles from the disco, the most northern neighborhood of Seattle that you can get, right there on the line, right? No purse? Nothing.
No purse, no, not any other, just a random license on the side of a road, found supposedly by a road construction or road survey crew.
By a road survey crew.
Yep. And they recognized her picture and called the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department.
What's significant about where this license was found is the different counties. A lot of times we see counties get involved. There's a juggling process that takes place, which hinders a lot of cold cases, which is why a lot of cold cases end up cold, because there's a juggling. There's a lack of responsibility that's taken initially. There's questioning amongst, responding officers, detectives, and so forth of who takes this, why take this, whatever. We have the only piece of evidence that has ever been found in your mother's case, found on a county line. Snohomish County gets the call, and they log this in evidence, and it's a significant piece of the case.
Well, we don't really know if it's been logged into evidence, because we don't know where the license is, nor do we know, there's no trail of the license.
What do you mean?
Well, there's no evidence at King County or Snohomish County that it was taken in. Is no license. The license does not exist with King County either.
Sorry to hear that. So for those of you who are listening, you have the only piece of evidence now that has come up missing. Done. And no other items were found, but just this license was found. And back then in 1978, licenses were just a flimsy piece of paper. They weren't even laminated or anything like that.
Yes.
But it was found miles away from where her last known location was, which was 165th and Bothell Way. At this point in the investigation, face value, you have to assume that the information out there is correct, that the police have is correct. And what they have at the time is Arlene and Lou saying that they left the club to kind of go look for her on their way home. And saw her. She refused to ride at 165th and Bothell.
Yes.
And this just disappears. The only evidence just disappears after that. That's pretty disturbing. What's even more disturbing to me is, which you already know, is let's just lay it out there. All right. Well, what was happening in her life at the time? Was she happy? What was going on? I think she told friends that she was being followed. Who possibly could have been following her?
Excuse me. Well, at this time in her life, she was newly divorced from my dad. And from all accounts, it was a amicable time after their divorce. And they my dad had custody rights, at certain days, but for all intents and purposes, if he wanted me, he got to see me. And so they did really well co-parenting that way. She had dated they'd been divorced. I mean, not together for a couple of years, basically since I was born, but the divorce was final the beginning of 78. Anyways, she had been serious with a couple of gentlemen. She had dated the Scott guy. Now, single for a couple months at this point. And she was out having a good time, but she was in being out having a good time. She was doing pretty much everything she could do to go against the family values of her family. My grandparents, Ray and Frances Anderson, were high profile builders, and they built the church, Westgate Chapel.
Oh, hold up. High profile. Important. Yeah, you that's a significant deal. That's a very significant deal. So let's I want to keep everybody on the edge of their seat. So let's rewind to who Barbara's dad is, your grandfather. Let's go into her story before she goes missing.
Okay.
Tell us about your mom, how she grew up, who her dad and her parents were, what her environment was like, because that's going to lay the ground for what we're going to get into.
So my grandfather was a wealthy businessman, basically. He built over 1,000 homes in his day, which is not as significant now if you know how builders build, but back then it was impossible to build that way. So 1,000 homes is a lot. And they were a very religious family. So in 1958, Westgate Chapel was built, and in Edmonds. And basically, you had to live in a bubble. So there were 3 kids in that family, and you dressed a certain way, and you talked a certain way, and you acted a certain way. And if you didn't, you were in trouble. And there was no options. You couldn't wear makeup. Your skirt couldn't be short. My mom couldn't go skating or bowling or anything recreational because they might be playing music that might be possibly inappropriate. There might be boys there. There might be somebody who would say a bad word possibly. And so you were kept in this bubble, and you had to act and live every day, every moment in this bubble. And my mom didn't really do well in that environment, and she pushed back. And so she was a little sneaky, and she would do stuff like take makeup to school when she was in high school and put makeup on at school, which was a big no-no. there was a party at a church party, mind you, and my grandfather found out about it, and he went himself, and he literally drug my mom out of that party. And there was nothing, there was no drinking, there was nothing happening at this party that would make that a reasonable thing to do to your daughter. It was control, and you did not have a choice. You had to be a certain way at all times, or he was going to make sure you were. That's the way it was. He was the leader of this church. No, he wasn't the pastor, but his brother was the pastor. And there are quotes from people hearing my great uncle Roger say that my grandfather was the father of Westgate Chapel, which as Christians, you would not say any human was the father of a church. It's just not the right way to describe that. So as she became an adult, and she got married right out of high school. So, I mean, my dad and her eloped. They got married right up like days after she graduated. They went to California, got married, came back to save face. My grandpa did throw her a reception at Westgate Chapel. Because at this point they were married now. And so to make a big stink about it would have made the Anderson name look bad, and we're not going to do that. So they bought in, and my dad was part of the family for a few years, and that was great. Well, after they had me and separated and then got divorced, my mom was out having a nice time, and she would go to clubs and she would go dancing, and all of that is a sin, and all of that is against everything my grandpa would have wanted. And so in the beginning of this 2 years ago, when we started this kind of myself diving into finding out what happened, actually one of the first people I talked to was one of her best friends growing up. And she said to me, first time I've heard it, she said, "Oh yeah, your mom was actually being followed by somebody." And at first she thought it might be maybe your dad or her ex-boyfriend. But she found out really quickly that it was her dad, because he would call and say to her, "Why were you here? Why were you there? Who were you with? Why is that person on a motorcycle? Why are you doing this?" So he was not hiding the fact that he was having her followed. It was almost more of a, "I'm following you because I can, and I'm going to be in control, and I'm hopefully going to convince you to stop doing these things because they're an embarrassment to me." So many, many, many people since then have said that they knew that she was being followed. One person was a pastor at the time, and he has confirmed that he knew that she was being followed. And I mean, almost everybody I have spoke with has clearly said that she was basically disgracing the name, the Anderson name at the time, by her behavior of choosing to go out at times and choosing to have some drinks and choosing to be dancing. Those were all things that were just not okay.
Being followed by her dad, and she figures it out because he's approaching her.
He's calling her after. So he wasn't the one following. Yeah.
Well, I say I chose those choice of words because it was either he was doing it or he was having somebody doing it, because he was approaching her afterwards with evidence of where she had been. And these are the same places where she had suspicions of being followed.
Yes.
Very controlling man, very different time from what anybody listening to this can relate to, unless you were aware of, that time. You come up from that time. We're talking about, an area in Washington that not many people that are going to listen to this can even relate to. Very strict religious beliefs. Your grandfather, your mother's father, was a deacon. He's a builder of the church. His brother is the pastor of the church, and very rooted in the community, very tight-knit, controlled community, down to as far as, how you're supposed to act, what you're supposed to be, what you can and can't do. What was it about your mom's lifestyle at the time that didn't fit with her father's beliefs, the church beliefs, and that entire system? Because that's going to lay the groundwork for people to understand the whole concept behind what may have happened on this theory, that is.
I don't know, Doug, that I can tell you anything she was doing that would have been okay. I'll be honest. Even the fact that she got her own job was not what he wanted. He wanted to pay for her to live, which, of course, as we know, would fall in the line of control. But for him, there was pretty much nothing that she was doing that was okay. You're not supposed to drink. You're not supposed to dance. You're not supposed to work a full-time job because you're a woman and you're supposed to be home raising your daughter. You're not supposed to be going to friends' houses and having drinks and doing anything else that you were doing. You certainly were not supposed to be out dancing at a disco on a Thursday night when you were supposed to work the next day, God forbid. There was pretty much nothing that she was doing that he would be proud of. And he was not shy about sharing that information with people in the church.
So you have this big community, this big community as far as family, church, deacon, brother, very involved in the community, leaders of the community, extremely wealthy businessman. One of the premier builders of his time, in your own words. His daughter goes missing. What happens? You mean, the whole city stops and looks for her, right?
Right. I mean, you would think, but what happened was almost nothing. There were a couple of articles in papers, and I have been told that there was a news broadcast about it somewhere. However, Como, Cairo, and King 5 can't find that footage. So we have tried, but anyways, almost nothing, to the point where I have talked to every pastor that's ever well, except for my great uncle who's deceased, every other pastor that's pastored that church, and more than 50 members that were members during that time, and a few of them were their children because they passed. But all of these people attended during that time. They were at Westgate during this time, and nothing happened. They didn't talk about her. They didn't pray for her from the pulpit of this church. Nothing happened. There were no searches. There were there did not go anywhere. And
Sorry.
it's okay. There was nothing. It took convincing to even do a reward poster. It took convincing. My uncle was actually quoted. Somebody was in the room when this happened, and they said to him, "If you don't put something out there offering a reward, you are a wealthy businessman in the Seattle area. If you don't put something out there, it makes you look really bad." So there's your prompting for doing a reward or a poster about it.
Yeah. So you're talking about this poster right here. This is the original poster.
Yes.
That was put out. And I apologize if I'm not flowing with all these clicks.
No worries.
And, right now we're worried about getting your story out there, a voice for your mother, so that we can create some movement in this case.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reward initially?
Initially,
it says it there.
What's that?
It says it right there.
Is that there's two technically? Is that I can't read it.
This is the first. This is the lower one.
So this is it 7,000 or 6?
7 and
okay,
3.
7. So originally he had it at 6,000, and then again his uncle went to him and said, "That's not enough. You're a wealthy man. You need to look like you're a wealthy man looking for your daughter." And so he made it 7,000. And so that's the first reward he did. And then he did raise it. I can't remember the time frame, but he did raise it to 10,000 at some point. But he also put an expiration date of a couple of months on that 10,000.
Okay. So very little was done in regards to anything.
Yes.
That is completely uncharacteristic of anything I have ever learned or heard of.
Well, and if I'm speaking candidly about my grandfather, who, if those who do know me and those who don't, just to tell you, my grandfather was like my world. So I wouldn't be who I am today without this man. So this is not easy for me to talk about him in this light, but he was so high profile in that day that when he would build a plat of homes, he would be on the front page of the Seattle Times, which if you lived in this area and knew what the Seattle Times even today, with most things being online, is one of the #1 premier papers in all of this area. So let alone back in the day, that's all they did was the Seattle Times was the paper. That was it. So people all over the state were getting the Seattle Times, and he would be on the front page. I have them. Front page of the Seattle Times would be his 3 children sitting on a couch, exactly proper and perfect, all dressed up with their curls perfect. And so if you can get that kind of coverage for building a house, imagine what you could get if your child was missing.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, at that time, with that type of stature and root within the community, you control the community.
Mm-hmm. And
you really do. You really do. A lot of people think influence nowadays, dictates all, is a hear all, say all. Back then, it really was. It was 100 times more than it is nowadays.
Yes.
So huge, another red flag, which is, not much is being done,
Right.
So that pretty sums up what the public knows. That's all there is, according to the public, outside of your new voice on your podcast and laying it out and you doing all of this. That's all there is. If it wasn't for what we're doing right now and your podcast and what's going to happen, nobody would know anything differently. And we've kind of like laid some Easter eggs for there's other stuff and things don't add up and there's so much more. And the truth is, what we just got into is just 1% of it. It's just 1% of the case. And everything that's going to come hereafter is all you're doing. Your relentlessness to just not accept what you're being fed and your gut and your intuition. And you followed that. Even when it didn't make sense, you followed that. So let's get into where that took you, So let's start back from the very beginning with relaying the story, the real story, what you've been able to cover, the real evidence with what you've been able to put together that refutes everything else and sets the stage for the real storyline and what happened to your mom 46 years ago.
Okay. Well, from the very first minute, one of the things that we didn't even mention in the beginning was, where was Jaime in all of this? Where was this little almost 2-year-old little girl? I was supposedly with my dad. That is the story. That is what everybody has told me my whole life. That is what everybody just believed. And to this day, I don't know if I don't believe that. That's not what I'm saying. However, in my search, the first 6-8 months of this, a couple years ago, a gentleman came forward and said, actually, I was babysitting you that night. I was at your house. I was 14 years old. I was your neighbor, and I was babysitting you that night, and your mom never came home. Okay, so now I've got this man now who says he was at my house, we have spoken multiple times. He is 100% sure he was at my house that night. There is certainly, and I've even mentioned this to him, people that know more than I do say that because of the tragedy of that kind of event, it's possible that you were babysitting another night and this situation happened. And he says, nope, I know it's not that, because that was the last day I ever babysat. And what is significant to him is the next morning. So now we're talking the 3rd. Normally what would happen is he would babysit. He would get there and I was already in bed. So I'm, less than 2 years old. She'd put me to bed 7:30 or 8. This kid would be there. He said, I never even had to do anything with you ever in the 8 to 10 times I babysat you. And then the next morning, about 11 to 12 at night, she would come home and wake him up and pay him every single time, pay him in $1 bills and send him home. And that's it. Well, this night is significant to him because at about 6 a.m. in the morning, some man woke him up and told him to go home. A little bit gruff, a little bit rude-ish, not kindly waking him up, and just said leave. Didn't pay him or offer to pay him, nothing, and just sent him home. So that's kind of one of the things we're dabbling with right now is, where was Jaime? Okay, so Scott, who picked my mom up that night, Does not remember a babysitter, did not go in the house, he doesn't think, but needless to say, this guy says he was babysitting me. Scott picks my mom up from the house. They go to Fandango's. They are there early, which is not, the reports make everything about 2 to 3 hours later than what anything I can find out now says, which is fairly significant. And they're not there very long, an hour or so before all of this kind of erupted. And she tells him, I'm just going to have Brenda take me home. Don't worry about me. He gets up a little huffy and he leaves. And my mom walks out the door. So now remember, supposedly she's going to be walking down this busy street. Well, I had the opportunity to speak to Arlene, who would have been one of the 2 people to see her the last ever. And the significance for me in talking to her in how she says this, people can say a lot of things, and I'll be honest, Arlene was very honest and said, I don't remember very much about that night. I was drinking and, but here's when I said to her, this is a really important question to me. What was my mom's demeanor the last time you saw her on the side of that road? And she jumped back at me and said, oh, honey, we didn't see your mom that night. We drove up and down that road looking for her and we never saw her.
Right here. This is where this is where the police report, this is where the public believes that interaction took place at 165th and Bothell Way, right here at the intersection, less than a quarter of a mile away from the disco. Never took place.
Never took place.
And I believe Arlene, the second you told me, sitting in your living room, this is a core memory for her. Clearly. So you understand this thing. You remember these things. It like most people would question, oh, well, we can't place too much significance on that because people forget things. No, this is a core memory for Arlene. So she's going to be able to accurately articulate what she remembered based upon her friend's disappearance, especially something so significant. What's a red flag to me is that this has been the narrative in the public's eye, but she never corrected that. She never came forward. Is that because it was 1978, or maybe she didn't even know? I don't know. Like, what do you think about that there? Because that's pretty alarming to me looking back.
When she stated that to me, her last words about that were, and we told the police that. That's what she said. I will also say her dad was a Seattle police officer at the time and basically made her go in to the police. And I just have this kind of feeling that there was maybe some prompting or help there. You don't really know, but I 100% believe her.
Absolutely, there was. I think good intentioned. I mean, you can't place a finger on it 46 years later, but yes, it does sound normal. Like if I was an officer, I mean, even if I'm not, if my daughter right now, one of my daughters, like I would do the same thing. Like it's just common sense.
You're going to protect your daughter as well.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I have my whole life. One of the things I have stated, which has surprised people because it's been reported from the get-go that she was walking down the road, last seen, blah, blah, blah. I have always said, I don't think she made it out of that parking lot. I don't think she made it out of that parking lot. I don't.
So now 40, I guess this was 45 years at this was last year when you find this out.
Yes. That
she was never seen at that intersection. There's no anything verifying that she ever left that parking lot. Mm-hmm. Where did we go with that? Like, where does that go? So we want to take into consideration she never left the parking lot. Where does that reset the case? She's had a disagreement with somebody that she went to the bar with. That person allegedly left, was not there, and why he left and was somewhere else at another bar up north, which we'll get to that stuff later. She decided to leave. Nobody really recognizes her leaving or anything like that. Nobody knows if she left the parking lot or not.
Right.
Why? I mean, you young, beautiful woman, like everybody's got their eyes on her. She's a competitive dancer. She just walks out of this disco and nobody knows anything.
Well, right. And not a friend follows her. Not a friend doesn't. I mean, there's just so many pieces to it that don't make sense to me.
Right. So from an investigative curriculum standpoint, if we want to take into consideration, unfortunately, something horrible has happened to your mom, it is always somebody close. Random murders rarely happen. That's right. Random murders rarely happen. Over 90% of all murders, and I don't know what the exact accurate statistic is, but it's drastic. Almost all murders are committed by somebody that has an emotional attachment to that victim or close connection, such as a coworker or a lover or a relative or a roommate or somebody close, right?
Yes.
So you have all these people that are close to her. You have your dad, you have her family, you have a roommate, you have Scott, you have your dad, her ex-husband at the time. Like all these people should be principal key potential suspects. Yes. Let's go talk to these people. Whatnot. We have a license that's been found 5 days later, but it wasn't where they told the public it was found. Where was this license found? Let's get into where this license is found. The only piece of evidence that doesn't even exist anymore, allegedly, from everything that we have to go off of, it doesn't exist anymore. Walk us into correcting that narrative.
Well, this is kind of a big one because of what has been told. About a year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with a gentleman who, technically my uncle, but sit down with a gentleman who I kind of says with similar strength as Arlene said she didn't see her. He says, and I quote, "Under the direction of Ray Anderson, we were told to meet at this location." This location is what you would consider east on 405 from where the I-5 405 interchange is. You would have to go east.
I don't mean to cut you off, but under the direction of Ray Anderson.
Yes.
Her dad.
Yes.
The only piece of evidence that has ever been found and doesn't exist anymore was found by the direction of her dad. The news reported that it was a road worker that found it on the side of a highway.
Yes. So there was a large group of people that were told to be there under the direction of Ray Anderson. And they were told to meet at this location that, again, is not at the intersection. Everybody assumed it was on the freeway. That's kind of what they alluded to. And it was definitely not. It was down off of the freeway, down on a back road in the woods, kind of. Well, there was a road there, but I mean, it's a very wooded area. And this group of people met there in this area. And at some point, someone yells that they found the license. And when they get back, my grandfather has my mom's license in his hand.
That's extremely significant.
I think so as well.
And it's shocking when you take into consideration the totality of the events that have taken up to this point, and that he is out there, not with the police. He's out there directing people to search in areas. It makes no sense to search. This area is miles and miles away from her last known location. Nothing puts your mom at this random location on the line of another county, but it does. It wasn't found on the side of the highway. At the time where this license was found by this group of people, was found near
Scott's house. The guy she was with that night.
The guy she was with that night. So here we go again. You have somebody close to her that she went out with that night, who she got in an argument with that night. And then the only piece of evidence that has ever been found is found down the street from his house at the time, Satellite imagery shows it was a dead end. It wasn't on the side of a highway. It has no reason for this piece of evidence to even be there. And it was found by the direction of her dad, who was having her followed. That's just a lot. And it obviously points to Scott. It points to grandfather, Ray, Barbara's dad, your mom's dad. Those are two different directions. Why is he directing a team that finds the only piece of evidence near the last person that was with her that night in an area where it should never have been? What do you make of that? Like, how does that even make sense? Like, what comes from that?
There's obviously a couple of directions there's an obvious direction is that, Scott did something to my mom taking her somewhere, and it's right by his house. That's an easy pickup, but I'll be honest with you, that's not where my brain went first when I found out the location and we went and drove the location. And I had a very, very strong just understanding or feeling for me that it was more like someone had followed Scott and knew where Scott lived and put this license there on purpose. That's more what it felt like to me. I can't say that's true. Obviously, I don't know, but those are the only two scenarios that I could add up in my brain, because there's no way for someone to know where to put that license for it to be. I mean, how likely would it be somebody would have randomly driven down that back road behind the houses that he lived in and done something to my mom and dropped the license, which would be stupid, but that stuff does happen.
And only the license, a little flimsy piece of paper.
Yes, only the license. It was intact, so perfectly intact. So it wasn't, you're talking days later, right? So it wasn't soaking wet. It wasn't ruined, nothing. Again, supposedly, because I can't see it myself.
But you have spoken. I'm going to put this out there. Now, you guys that are listening to this, you're going to have to check out Jaime's podcast to fill in all the blanks, because she has her own podcast that she just released, multiple episodes that are already out, episodes that are coming out that details all of the things that we're not purposely putting here. So you can go connect with Jaime and get the entire story for all of the details. But I'm just going to say a little bit about the license and what you were just getting to, which is what advantages or what does your grandfather Ray have to gain from doing this if you want to lead to suspect that he has planted this piece of evidence? Because people that are listening to this is going to be like, oh, well, he had her followed. She knew she was being followed. He was controlling and so forth. He's the only one to find evidence. His search group in an area where, why do you even have a search group there? It doesn't make sense, at least not yet. What does he have to gain from it?
I'm not sure, Doug, I don't know if I have an answer to that or I have a real thought to that, because I have such a hard time putting into perspective that if my grandfather has something to do with this, which I'm open for because things are leading that direction, unfortunately, I know it's going to be somebody I know at this point, I'm pretty sure, but I don't know what the gain would be except to point the finger at Scott, obviously, because there's no other reason he would do that. And beyond that, I struggle with why he would be. I mean, I understand being embarrassed by your children. I get all of that, but I have a really hard time finding logical reasons for why he would do any of that stuff. But the only reason I can think of would be to point the finger for somebody to find it and to realize its area, where it's at and what it's closest to. And somebody to say, wait, doesn't Scott live right up the road?
Yeah. That's not what happened?
No. We figured out how close it was to Scott's house. They had not one thing in the file talked about how close it was to Scott's house. Nothing.
Yeah. So the license was found right here. Scott's house is right down the road.
As a crow flies, it's not even a quarter mile. I mean, right. I'm not joking.
We're showing a graphic right now. So it gives you perspective between where the license was found, where Scott lived with his roommate, Lou, who was also at the party, or not the party, I'm sorry, at the dance, who told police he saw her last.
Yes.
which is 10 miles or so ish away from the dance.
Yes.
That's the most critical component of it investigation wise, which is, you have all of these suspects. Who did they talk to? Did they talk to, all of these principal key players? The principal key players at this point for any investigator that has what we're laying out would be obviously Scott, Lou, anybody who was there at the dance. And then from that closest, your dad, her ex-husband would be probably the next, her dad, and so forth. And it starts ballooning out from there.
Right.
Who did they talk to? What happened next?
They, my dad, once they found the
let's label
King County.
So King County has the case.
Yes.
They've decided at this point with some juggling that it's their case. And what do they do now?
So on Thursday, the day the license is found, which I also find to be a little bit significant because it seems to be really quick based on what the order is as far as it was told, meaning it went to Snohomish County and then it went to King County and then it went to, well, the understanding that I have found out is that on Thursday, the license was found. My dad and Scott were both called in for a lie detector test that day. And they both went in that day. My dad actually went in multiple days for lie detector tests and passed every one of them. Scott went in for one lie detector test, was told he passed. They wouldn't bother him again, and they didn't. That's for sure. They did not bother him. There was a little bit of back and forth with getting a hold of Lou and Arlene, which also makes sense to me now knowing what her dad does. Just because I feel like you would say, no, you don't talk to them. You wait until I'll take you in, kind of. I just, as far as being a parent, I can see that. And then they both went in also and had a conversation, and that's it. Nobody else.
Nobody else.
Nobody.
No other family members.
Nobody.
Nobody from the church. They didn't.
Nope.
All right. So and it just stops from there, right? You've seen this case file years later. You fought your way into King County, and you were able to sit down personally in a room alone and see the case file. And after that, it's done. The case was done. The case was cold in how many days?
Well, they didn't technically use those words, but there was nothing that happened after about 2 weeks after she was missing. Basically nothing. But in February, there was actually a comment. So you're talking 3 months later, there's a full comment that says there is no other evidence. There's been no other leads in this case. This case is cold in February.
Yeah.
And essentially not one thing has been done since then until, a year and a half ago. And again, just making some stirring and trying to get them to reopen the case, which they said they have, but not a lot's been done.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's essentially because the more you look into it, the more you talk to people, the more work you put into, the more you find out the truth that was never known before, that even they don't know, that simple investigative tactics could have, remedied years and years and decades ago.
I think the biggest part for me was when I sat down with them the first time, they were very receptive. And I mean, very kind and very, we've looked at the file and you are right. Not a lot was done. To my face and on one of the television programs, they have stated this is a solvable case. We can find the answers to this. So I'm like, this is going to be amazing. I'm so excited, And then a year later, after almost nothing being done, and I mean a few hours of work being done, and that's a legitimate answer, I requested another meeting. And unfortunately, I had to request a meeting with the sheriff also of major crimes because I was getting nowhere and I was getting not okay answers. And I'm not somebody, I'm pushing, but I'm not pushing disrespectfully. I respect and appreciate what they do. One of my best friends was the sheriff. So I 100%, and my husband's a fireman. Like I understand and I respect what these people do for a living. So I was not calling every day and emailing. I'm talking not even once a month. I was giving them their space, understanding what their job really is. And so the second time I sat down with them, it was basically, I asked them, this was my request. I am asking that you guys would please look at this case like it's new. Stop reading the file and thinking what's in the file is what happened, because I don't think that's right. I think something else went on here. And I don't think I think if you keep saying, well, no, because she was walking, or no, because this is what happened, then you're going to miss what really happened to my mom. And for goodness sakes, the file's tiny. I mean, I'm sure it's bigger now after I've made a big stir, but in general, this was a very thin file. It was not hard. It took me 40 minutes, and that's with a brand new eyes and having a hard time going through it to go through this whole file. It was not very much. So please go through this from the beginning and look at it like it's something different. And I just don't know. I hate to say this because I've tried to be very respectful, but I don't know if they have the capacity to do that. I think they can only take what they see and feed off of that, because I don't know that anything they have is true, or very little is accurate at this point. And if you don't look at it differently and you think that's what happened, then either she just walked away or someone just grabbed her, and we're never going to know anyways. And that's pretty simple for them to come to and be done with, right?
Right. And it's a all too common predicament for a lot of families all over the country, which is that there's very little that has been done in the case for whatever reasons they have to justify it or not justify it in the beginning, that nothing was done. Very little was done, and it should have been done. And now you fast forward X amount of years, and there's evidence that doesn't exist anymore. There's memory that doesn't exist anymore. And it's all like, wow, I wish this would have happened, or I wish that would have happened. And it provides a lot of clarity into the mistakes that are made, even without results, which you don't have yet. You're going to get, but you don't have it yet. And this is just a path to get to there. But it labels the mistakes a lot more prominent. You know, what wasn't done. I mean, you could look at a couple of sheets of paper and see everything that was done on your mother's case in the total of 4 decades, which is not great. This is not good representation for the public of King County. They do not have a cold case unit.
Like Barbara's.
We have not had a cold case unit for over 12 years.
They've always struggled with funding and so forth. And they have, retired representatives that do come in and help when they're directed to help and so forth. But, there's a couple of thousand cold cases there in King County and more, because a lot of them are just left open so that they're not categorized as cold cases, because it's all optics. We're getting into the optics of these cases, and that's what affects the outcome, is because these departments, these agencies, they have to protect the optics of, what does the public think? How are we looking? And unfortunately, no matter how you paint this, no matter how you tell this story, it's been 46 years later, and there's a lot of shocking components to this case that should have warranted a huge investigation, should have warranted a huge manhunt, and so much more, and nothing was done. And you're sitting here with me trying to get answers 46 years later, and that shouldn't be the case. You should have the answers instead of not knowing. And I know not knowing is brutal. You just want to know. And you've told me several times before, it's not about pinning this on somebody. It's just you simply want to lay your mother to rest. You want to bring her home, and anything after that is just, it doesn't matter. Whatever happens, happens. If justice happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Just finding your mom and bringing her home. And people know what happened to your mom, because there's people still alive today that were there. Scott's still alive. Ray has passed. But there's other players that are involved in your mom's life that we haven't discussed. And let's get into that. She's gone missing. Evidence was found. Nobody put it together. The case is now cold. Pretty much nothing's being done. And time is just spinning. Nothing's being done. Well, what's life like in the Anderson family? Like what's happening? Is who's out there, pounding the streets looking for your mom?
Well, I don't know that anybody was. I know that my grandpa wasn't. I know that we were not talking about it. I know that my aunt was. My Aunt Sharon has always, been as much of an advocate for most of the time to finding what happened to my mom as anyone. What I know is that very quickly after and I'm talking probably February, I think, if I can, I may be off by a month, but my grandfather supposedly had a dream that my mom was in heaven and that she was fine, and that was it. We stopped looking. That's what happened. And my Uncle Ken, there was one news reporter who tried to keep her story alive. I've actually messaged with him back and forth. He is unwilling to have a conversation with me, but he did several articles, February, March, and maybe even into May, that were really, I was really grateful for, because it's the only thing that ever tried to keep her story longer than 4 minutes, I felt like. My uncle was questioned in one of those, and he made it very clear that she lived a fast life and she was dating a lot of men and she got what she deserved in an article that was published.
This is her brother, Ken. We haven't laid this out now. Now we're bringing in a new player.
Yes.
A new key person close to her in her life.
Yes.
Her brother.
Yes.
Ken has now basically washed his hands and thrown her under the bus publicly in an article.
Yes.
Shortly thereafter, her disappearance.
Yes.
Okay. What happened at the house? She shared a house with Arlene, who she was out with that night. Yeah. I would believe that, the police would have searched the house, turned it upside down, and looking for evidence, and take us into what happened now.
So there was no police search of the house. I know that 2 days after she went missing, Marvalee, it was her best friend at the time, and for many years they went to high school at King's together. And Marvalee and her husband owned this home. So they lived there, then they moved out and they rented the home to my mom. Brenda wasn't after, she came a few months later and stayed. Anyways, there was no police search of the house. 2 days after she went missing, Marvalee pulls up to the house. Someone is there. They go into the house, and Ken has a duffel bag, and he is packing stuff of my mom's in the duffel bag. Clothes is what she saw him packing into the duffel bag.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
Again, this is just another red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the red flags are, they're just red flags, but they're significant. 46 years later, they're considered evidence. That's how you solve cases. All of these different components are what a real researcher, investigator puts together and considers on their board of evidence. We're not talking courtroom evidence. We're talking about things that happen behind closed doors that get to results and delivering answers. This is something that does not add up. Why is he in the house? How did he get in the house? He's there taking all of her stuff.
Mm-hmm. My mom's keys were never found. However, he did have a key to her car because he was able to sell it illegally.
And her car was where?
We don't know.
Did she drive her car to the disco that night? That's something that we did lay out. So she didn't drive her car. She rode there with Scott, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So we're missing a car at this moment. This is kind of how.
What kind of car is this?
It is a 65 Corvette.
Okay. And I know we've worked together. You don't have the VIN. But if you have if anybody out there in King County or the entire Pacific Northwest that has a maroon or any color for that matter, reach out to us, because yes, because that car could still exist, and that car, you just never know. We're not saying that car has to do with anything, but if you do, reach out to us, because we want to try to bridge that gap if there's a gap there.
Yeah. So at this time we are missing a child. Clearly I was not missing because I'm here, but at that time, King County doesn't know where I am. They had made no note of where I was. There is a car that no one knows. So nobody can remember seeing the car. And I mean, the babysitter, Scott, Marvalee, when she drove up, can't remember if the car, nobody can remember it. To me, that's significant, because if somebody was missing and I drove up to her home and her car wasn't there, that would be significant for me. Mind you, this is 46 and a half years ago. I don't know.
Mhm.
And there's a dog that is missing. There is a 100-pound Doberman Pinscher, not a small rat dog that would hide under a bed, a very large guard dog that is also missing. That's also a side note. Now, the dog does appear, and obviously the car does because my uncle sells it, and obviously I do because here I am. But my aunt ends up taking that dog and keeping it for a while and then selling it. So they all appear again. So they didn't disappear with my mom, but they, for some reason during this time period, are unavailable by anybody. Nobody can recall these things being around.
What happens? He's packing clothes, and why is he packing clothes? It wasn't too long ago, several weeks ago, I'm with a family who has an individual who's been missing for 27 years. Their room is still the same.
Yes.
And I can't count how many other families that I have been with who, I mean, they can't even fathom. I mean, there's when somebody goes missing and you don't know, there's just, unless you've been in that situation, you'll never know. But the last thing you're ever going to do is get rid of their stuff or disturb anything right away. Basically, this is your mom's home. She's renting it from a friend. She's staying with her roommate, Brenda. And here it is. Her brother's in there packing all her stuff, but not all her stuff.
Just clothes. Yeah.
Just clothes.
So that's the
bag, allegedly, just a bag. Weird, real weird. Because if I tell you what, if that was my sister, I wouldn't be touching anything. I wouldn't be allowing anybody to touch anything. And that it would be just this sacred place of just a pause, per se. Does that make sense? And then that wasn't the scenario here.
No.
That doesn't add up.
Less than 2 weeks after she went missing, my grandparents went to the house. They must have contacted Marva Lee to go there. She doesn't recall that, but Marva Lee was there. So, and they came over in my grandpa had this small out of character pickup truck. Anyways, they came and they took a couple of trunks worth of items, which is, from what I understand, what I have now of my mom. And that's it. They left everything else in that house, which, if you know my grandfather, it makes absolutely zero sense, because that man did nothing partway, nothing halfway. If he was responsible for something, Lord knows that man was doing it in every possible perfect way he could, because his name was on it. So if someone was going to tell the story later that Ray and Francis came in and took a couple of items and left everything else for Marva Lee and made him look bad, he never would have done it. He shows up to that house. They take my stuff, rightfully so. And because they did a lot of caring for me, because my dad worked full time. So they had me quite a bit the 6-8 months after she went missing. And a few trinkety items. And they did take her, which honestly, they took her crystal plate sets and silverware silverware that they used back in the day, and kept that, and that they left everything else. They left everything, all the furniture except for my furniture, all the furniture, everything they left in that house and drove away. And some people are like, well, I don't think I'm like, listen to me. If you know my grandma and grandpa, they would never have done that halfway and drove away and said, haha, Marva Lee, you could take care of the rest, because how rude is that? This is my mom's best friend. So they have a relationship with this landlord. This is her best friend, and you're going to dump that all on her to come into that home and take care of? That is out of character, very out of character.
Out of character. It doesn't add up. Like I said, it's a red flag, and it means something. We'll get to that and what I possibly think of that, but it doesn't add up. It proves there's something extra there. It's not normal behavior. And in a cold case, in any case, active or whatnot, things that don't add up, usually you end up with a digit that makes sense.
Yes.
So where do you go from here? What happens? The church is, she comes from a huge church family,
Mm-hmm.
leaders of the community. Faith is the principle
Mm-hmm.
that guides this entire situation. Public vigils, church ceremonies, find the deacon's daughter, let's pray, power of prayer, the most powerful aspect. It kind of chokes me up even talking about it. But
Mm-hmm.
like, tell us about all those things that were happening.
None of that happened. The only things I have actual, and I have talked to a lot of them. So it is not just 2 or 3 people that I've chatted with that they weren't involved. I mean, a lot of people that were around then. There are 2 things that people said to me that showed that there were at least a little bit of hope that somebody cared. One was, ironically, which seems completely not okay, but a group of youth, literally youth. There were 3 leaders in the church. There was my grandfather, who was the father of the church from what they deemed him. There was Roger Anderson, who was the pastor. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Jim Hansen, also known as my grandpa's right-hand man. Very, very close to the family, vacationed together every vacation, stayed at each other's vacation homes, were together all the time. This gentleman, Jim Hansen, was the youth leader, and he was my mom's youth leader also when she was there. So significant to him. And he actually took the youth on a bus, literally, to the area that the license was found. And these kids were actually searching in people's backyards, which I was like, well, look at that. Somebody actually cared enough. Not that it was probably appropriate to have youth going, but at least somebody cared enough to have somebody look for her, I mean, that was nice. And then another gal who was close friends with my grandparents said that they would go over to their home, like a lot of times, very traditional church Sundays is dinner is early after church, and they don't do a dinner later at night. And it was very, very common, like almost weekly, that they would either go out with people or they would have them back to the house. And they said that often they would pray with my grandparents at the house for my mom. So what that looks like, who prompted that, I'm not sure, but that's it. Nothing else happened ever for her, ever.
Another big red flag,
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's even halfway religious, or not even religious, you understand the power of prayer.
Yes.
And what that brings, and the vein of that within such a community, not being pulsed is just hard for anybody else to wrap their mind around.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, just to clarify something, so Philadelphia Church is a church in Ballard in Seattle. Westgate, that's where my grandparents started. That's kind of their roots. And then a large group all moved to Westgate in Snohomish County. So it's both of these churches. And my uncle was Ken was the choir director at Philadelphia also. So, these churches are they're the same, basically, very intertwined. So you have 2 church bodies and from neither of them have I found any one time that there was a prayer vigil, saying something from the pulpit and praying for her, asking for search parties. Zero. Zero. The only thing I got to see from anybody was my uncle being mean to me my whole life. And I mean, very mean. That's the only thing I felt like. I don't know if it changed. Maybe he was always mean to me. I don't know. But boy, that man was not nice to me.
Her brother, your uncle.
Yes.
The same one who basically threw her under the bus, I don't have the article in front of me, but we know what happened. We've seen it. Yeah, that's shocking. The more we go, the more shocking it gets, and the more you follow it, it's going to take us down a road that just only points to a couple of directions. And it's, unfortunately, at this point in this, so far as we're laying out, there's a lot that keeps pointing back to your family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's tough. Like you said, that your grandfather raised you. He was an amazing man to you. And, a lot of who you are as a woman nowadays is because of that. but you're grown, you understand reality, you're seeing things were differently previous to you, and you know things don't add up. And prior to you and raising you, you know, he was different. He was different with other people and very controlling. And the church community was you know, sort of borderline. It was like a cult, because you had to follow the rules, you had to stay in line, or you weren't allowed in the community or even a part of it. And if you didn't, you were gone. Like, and your mother didn't walk that line. You know, she was beyond that life and was so far ahead of her time and didn't fit in. And that was a problem. No matter how you want to point the finger or label that, she was a problem for her dad, for the church, for image. And let's get into the sighting of her. There was a sighting of her that comes in. How long after the house incident where her stuff was packed, you know, 2 weeks later by her dad and everybody, half-assed, you would say, which doesn't make sense because of the intricate strategic man he was. He wouldn't have done that. There was a sighting of her.
There was
a sighting of your mom.
Yes. So 2 years. It was 2 years later. And it was by Jim Hansen, the gentleman that took the bus of kids and had them look in the neighborhoods. And there's a special place in Maui that, oddly, now it's a more popular area, but in the 70s, it was not a popular area. It's Kihei on Maui. And we have a lot of ties there. They go beyond what I really understand at this point, but there are condos, there's houses that were being built over there by family and family friends and business partners. And there's just a lot that happened there. And anyway, so Jim Hansen and his wife take a vacation and they go to Kihei, of course. And they are on the beach and his wife is laying sun tanning and he gets up and he's walking down the beach. And the story is really simple. And I have only found 2 people of the over 50 that I have talked with that do not know this story. And all of them know it directly from Jim's mouth. So this is something I felt like he was begging for someone to listen. He's walking down the beach and he comes face to face with this woman and she looks exactly like my mom. And he says, "Barb," and she looks at him and she turns and she runs. Now, this is not a guy that's a member of the church that's been going to Westgate, but that doesn't know the family, has maybe seen my mom, but doesn't know them well. You know, remember, she's living a different life, so she's not attending on Sundays right now. So it's not some guy that knew her 4 or 5 years ago and is like, "Oh my goodness, I think that might be possibly Ray Anderson's daughter." That's because I've seen flyers and news. That's not why. This is a man who knows her very well, very well. Very well.
Elaborate on that. Jim is how close to Ray in the church?
It's his right-hand man. He's the three. Those 3 men ran that church.
So if we want to consider that this is true, that is evidence. So now you have a sighting. All right, well, is this credible? You have somebody that's not going to mistake your mom. There is no possibility of that. No possibility. None. This isn't, like you said, this isn't somebody that just kind of knew on the outside. This is somebody who intimately knew your family.
Yes.
Almost as close as you could get.
Yes.
Has now seen your mom in Hawaii, and Hawaii is a significant place for your family because Ray has built homes in Hawaii. They vacation in Hawaii. Other people in the church go to Hawaii. They stay at these places. This is a really significant sighting. It's not like in some random place. This is a place that your family has ties to. Now there's a sighting. What comes from the sighting? Yeah, I'm sure her dad and everybody was like, "Oh my God, we're like, what kind of searches took place in Hawaii?"
Yeah, we're getting on the next plane, right? That's what I would have thought. So Jim goes back to get his wife, and he takes her. So, my mom runs and he's kind of shocked. And so he goes and gets his wife and he says, I just saw Barb, come with me. And they kind of walk down a little bit, don't see anything. So Jim decides, I'm going to go call Ray. So he goes up to his condo and he calls my grandpa and he tells him exactly what happened. And my grandpa basically says, you're crazy to him and does nothing. There is not a phone call made. There is not a plane trip planned. There is no call to the detectives here in Seattle or police in Hawaii. There's no calls to family to say, hey, we got to go take this trip that somebody says they might have saw my daughter in Kihei, which is where I own a condo, by the way. Nothing. He does nothing.
Wow.
And I don't care.
Go ahead.
I don't care if someone I could not stand, someone I didn't know, couldn't relate to, truly believe they were mentally crazy. I don't care what the circumstances was. If my daughter is missing, I'm going there to look for her.
Yes. Took the words right out of my. That's what I was about to say. I don't care who it is. I don't care how uncredible it is.
Yep.
Oh, and
I am
that,
making phone
and
calls, and I'm flying. And again, remember, he did not have the resources to get on a plane that day and fly there. He had the resources.
yeah. He could have chartered his own private flight.
100%.
Absolutely. And honestly, I'm probably sure your grandfather probably had access to multiple, planes.
We knew he had access to, and was well tied to other people that were in the same position or better. Right.
Yeah. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. Another red flag that is unfortunately centered around your grandfather, Ray, because it doesn't add up. It does not add up.
And I guess you can look at it in two different ways, if we're being honest, right? One way is I actually know what happened to her, so I don't need to go to Hawaii to look. I guess that's a way. The other way is, oh shoot, we've been caught. And if we look for her, but I guess I'll be honest. If I was under the impression that if I was in his position and I said, oh shoot, somebody saw her there, I would fake it and go get on a plane or do something. I don't know that I would have just said you're crazy and walked away, especially if you know Jim well enough, because people, I have not met one person who said they didn't trust him, didn't believe him, and didn't say he was a man of his word. Everybody said that, from his children to people that knew him as their youth leader as a kid. Everybody said that.
Yeah, you don't just brush people off who said they finally saw your daughter after you don't know what happened, and you're thinking the worst. And
so I'm not saying that him not doing anything about it is because she's in Hawaii. That's not what I'm saying. I just think it is a red flag about something.
Let's just sum this up. That's not normal behavior. Right. And also, there's I work with so many families, and I have to draw back on experience, because it's a constant learning thing that I have with absorbing all of the rabbit hole stuff and the things that play out in these cases. And because I've solved so many cases, I get to see the clarity, the 2020 looking back at, oh, wow, once you find the where, the why is just so clear. Now I know all this. Now I know all of that. I just spent time with a family in New Jersey who spent their entire life savings traveling because of false sightings. Mm-hmm. Spent their entire life savings and are just in a horrible financial spot, but they didn't care.
I would be that family.
They didn't even question every single call that came in, every fake sighting. It did not matter.
Yes.
And, he would even tell me it didn't matter. Like, if this call came in and they said they saw my daughter, I'm going. Like, even when I knew that it wasn't true, it didn't matter, because
what if it was?
Yes. And that's normal behavior. That's what I'm getting to. Those are the things that you have to establish. Okay, what is normal behavior? What leads us to conclude and have the audacity to just label something not normal behavior, and that's experience. And I'm gonna tell you right now that it doesn't add up. It's suspicious, big time. Your best friend or one of your really close friends says that they've seen your daughter. They've seen your daughter. They have seen your daughter. I'm sorry. Like, you know, it's a good thing that you're here doing this now, you know, but it sucks that it didn't happen at first and that we're actually here still. You're here still trying to fight for answers. And you're looking back and you're discovering all of these missteps and things that weren't done. Your mother had nobody in her life that was fighting for her. Nobody fought for her. No one stood up and said, "Where's Barb? We're going to find Barb," and kicking down doors. She unfortunately, up to this point, the way we've laid it out, she didn't have that. You know, if anything, she had the opposite of that. She had people throwing her under the bus that were close to her. She had people not following leads, not demanding the entire kitchen sink being thrown at a case. Because I tell you what, if somebody goes missing nowadays and they are a very wealthy individual, a white person, prominent, owns a not built a church, is a leader of his community, pillar of his community, his daughter goes missing, we all know what that is like. The entire world is going to know that that person is missing, and the world itself is not going to stop until that person is found or somebody gets brought to justice. That's the way it works. Yes, we have the internet and so forth now, but that's what should have happened back then. And that's what could have happened if there was that type of effort in her circle. And it just didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. It's shocking. And that's why I'm having you lay it out. And you know, a lot of people are going to confuse, you know, you're laughing and all that stuff. But this is pain. You know what I mean? This you're a mother's warrior, and this is how you're dealing with it. And this is the truth. It's the reality. And you're wearing it like a soldier, and you have to. No, you have to, because you're going to be the reason why answers are given to your mother. You know,
Yes.
somebody hearing your pleas, hearing your mother's story, hearing all the work that you've done. I'm helping you fill it in and guide you through it. And so people are going to hear this. People are going to put this together. People are going to go to your platform, and they're going to be able to give you answers. People are going to start contacting you, because it's going to create a firestorm. You know, the true crime community needs to take your mother's case and absolutely blanket it everywhere, because it's shocking. It is absolutely shocking why there hasn't been anything done into this point. And if you're listening, you're watching still, well, we haven't even begun. And it's just tough. It's really, really tough. I met you over a year ago. And when you told me your mother's story, you were only 2 years old. It kind of struck a chord with me, you know, and I know exactly firsthand. My mother went missing when I was very young. She was sex trafficked, so I know what it's like to grow up without a mom. I never had a mom. My mother was found years later, but she was never the same. She was never in my life. So, but I can relate to that. And then digging into your mom's case, us connecting, and everything else that has happened behind the scenes to get to this point, it really is for a reason. There's a big reason. There's something that's going to come from it. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's something good that's going to happen. And I really hope that it's answers. And I also hope that it's justice. I know you're not out for justice, but it's going to come with it. It really is. With that being said, let's talk about how people are still alive. So your uncle is still alive,
Yes.
who was in her life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that are deceased. It's 46 years later. Her roommate is deceased,
Yes.
no longer with us. Marley still alive, which is the owner of the house. She's doesn't really have anything in it, but for investigative standpoint, these are people of significance, because they could provide some type of clue to people that were in Barb's life. Scott is still alive.
Yes.
Lou is still alive.
From what we understand, we've not.
I found him.
Okay.
He's alive.
We've actually made contact, but we have a denial of knowing the name. So
He's still alive.
Yep.
Scott and Lou were roommates, and there's a lot of other people that were either in the church or around your mom that are still alive, that can still put key pieces of this together for law enforcement if they were to take it seriously and actually get out there, beat the streets, do an investigation, meet with people, log evidence and all of that good stuff. There's a lot that can come from this, but nothing is going to always lead to nothing, and no matter what, 1 + 1 = 2. And when you don't put one foot in front of the next, you don't get to the next level. You're standing in the same place. And right now the case is standing in the next place. Well, what does it take to get the case to the next place?
I don't know. I don't know.
I'm gonna tell you what it takes. King County
Okay.
doesn't have a cold case unit.
Right.
King County doesn't have the resources unless they're blanketed with bad optics to throw the book at this case. That's really what it would take.
Mhm.
If the true crime community, the media, and so forth outside of Seattle takes a look at this and really starts to dig in, that creates pressure, that creates optics, and then that would force their hand.
I want to say something, Doug. And again, I've tried really hard to not throw King County under the bus too hard, because I do know that they don't have the time. They have a huge major crime. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do have to say this. They have had people, both retired and active detectives, from Snohomish County, from Skagit County. The actual cold case unit from Snohomish County has called them and offered to help on this case. They have had so many offers for help from, not from a Jaime who's just wants to push the envelope, from professionals. Snohomish County took a particular interest because their name is also here in this case in a way, and they have denied everybody. And I think that's really important, because in general, I can understand all of the ideas that there's no cold case unit. They didn't have the funding for it. I went to King County Council and I fought for a cold case detective. Just give them one detective. Let me show you when I've done, pulled the records and said how many hours have been spent from a couple of detectives in overtime in the last year. It could have paid for a couple of cold case detectives for a year. And I understand that. I understand that their position. I respect it. What I don't respect is the fact that they have been offered professional, cold case professional help, and they have denied it.
Why do you think that is?
I can speculate. I can speculate all day.
Yeah.
But
It's just speculation. But what does your gut tell you?
Yeah, my gut tells me at this point, there's things that they have to keep quiet and that they don't want people to look at this file. I cannot speculate anything different because nothing else makes much sense to me.
Right. Back to optics. And that's just the bureaucracy that tends to control a lot of these cases.
Yes.
Outside of that, there's also, people that represented the case within the agency that were also a part of the church at the time too.
Yes.
What does that mean? I don't know, but you could make the ground for there definitely being, obviously there was missteps, right? If there weren't missteps, we wouldn't be sitting here. What those missteps were, how that makes them look, that is never my prerogative ever. I actually go out of my way to always make them look good. Even it's just something that I do, and I catch flack for that because there's a lot that happens, and it just the normal person just can't understand. They don't understand, and it's not worth even putting out there. I don't believe that there was some horrible corruption that happened. I do believe, though, that obviously there's some things there that don't add up. I don't believe that they're, horrible, though. I don't. But it still makes them look bad. They have to answer for that. They haven't had to answer for it. And they currently don't have to answer publicly for it because it's still classified as an active case, although nothing's being done. What it's going to take to change is public pressure, like we just labeled, and or them taking the professional courtesy to allow fresh eyes and ears within the case. That's how cases get solved, with fresh eyes. And does that happen because they close it and they give it to some professional investigators of their discretion? That's what needs to be done. That's literally what I'm advocating for in your mother's case, is for them to take the professional stance to release the files to a professional or professionals that they designate, so that they can then do what needs to be done to get them to the next level.
That was my request at the King County Council meeting, and they came back. So several of the King County members came to me and said they would like to help. And so they got involved a little bit, and they did a few things and some contacts. And the end result was this last February, finally, after I called them back, the council members, and said, hey, what's going on? They said, well, here's King County's response. They don't want to close the case, because if they close the case and give it to somebody to be investigated, then they cannot prosecute the person, which is an absolute lie.
That is an absolute lie.
Yes.
100% an absolute lie. It is a risk, because anything that is found by anybody else, they have to account for. They have to represent if it's ever used in a courtroom in order to prosecute somebody. They have to then, go through the chain of evidence. How was this discovered, and so forth, and literally lay out the integrity of that evidence. So they're always going to shy away from putting the possibility of something being discovered professionally and assigned to somebody who's not law enforcement, because theoretically, they have to account for that in court. It opens the door for a defense team to attack the credibility and integrity of a piece of evidence. And they don't ever want to be in that situation, but it's easily done. When a professional is on a case, they're logging what they're doing. They're like we've already discussed behind the scenes, journaling what you're doing, taking investigative professional standards of being able to prove why you did it, how you did it, when you did it, so that when that piece of evidence and that discovery is made in a courtroom, it can be protected. It's really easy to do when there's professionals involved. So that's just a bureaucratic blanket excuse. And I hate excuses. Excuses are the worst thing in life, because there's always solutions, and there's plenty of solutions for them to take this to the next level. And there's avenues there that can produce answers if they're pursued the right way. And that's going to happen. It's going to happen. This is what it takes. And before we get too far off track, I want to pull back in the Hawaii sighting and the significance of Jim, and him also sending the youth group that he knew. He's a member of the church to search, which was basically the only real search that was done after the license was found, which makes sense that he cared. He wanted something to be done, and the kids were holding the prayers. So the youth group is key. The youth group is innocent. They don't understand. They're really feeling this because they're innocent, and they're also wholesome in a way that this horrible thing has happened, and they're pressing forward. They're like, well, let's do something. Let's do something. If nobody else is doing something, we're going to do something. Mm-hmm. And one of their leaders is like, okay, let's pursue this. Yeah. So it's like Jim is really the only one that has had, a good, wholesome perspective into pursuing this. And he's shot down by his best friend. He's shot down by your grandfather. This didn't immediately he's shot down. Like, he's crazy. That had to have been very hard for him to handle, and him telling other people attesting to his accounts, all being the same and all being credible, and his credibility. That's very significant that happened. Why does he have the audacity to go back and search after a piece of evidence is found? That there's something there. What does that mean? I don't know, but it's significant. It's definitely significant. Prior to traveling out to Seattle and spending time with you, I had two major questions about this case based on all my initial research and so forth. which was obviously I wanted to know more about Scott because he was the last one with her. And I also wanted to know, all right, well, this horrible thing has happened. There's some, avenues that point back to family possibly being involved, the church being involved, a lot of really larger than life elements. Has anybody else gone missing? And when we met, you laid that out. You basically told me that you told me more about Scott, which I did not know, which was not good. Actually, it was horrible, but I'm not going to put that out there. I'm not going to label that. I'll let you do that on your podcast. You've met with Scott. You have that recorded on your podcast. So anybody listen to this can go check that out. That really threw me for a loop because that was not good. Actually, like twisted my gut hearing that because it didn't add up. And then hearing that your grandfather, Barbara's dad, has someone else very close to him that has disappeared and been murdered. And her body was actually found in California. That's really weird. Now you have two bodies that are connected very closely that don't add up. So you want to elaborate on sort of? It's his niece. It's his niece. It's his sister's kid that has been murdered. Went missing and was murdered. And there's evidence in that case. There's actually DNA in that case.
Yes.
Let's take everybody into that because now we have all of this rabbit hole within rabbit holes, and now we have somebody that was close to her who had some shocking activity in his history, and also somebody else has gone missing and was found murdered than the family.
Yes, and this was after my mom, but yes, his niece was at her sister's house with their baby, and basically baby's in the high chair and she vanishes. No clues, and just vanishes out the door. And they did have, there were a couple of things, like there was a delivery guy or something that, had come to the door, I guess, but nothing that led to anything then. And she's actually been on a couple of shows. If you can find her on Netflix, I think, or Hulu, and her story is on a couple of shows. They thought maybe she was attached to a couple of other killers at times. And, but yes, basically just vanished. They did find her body 2 weeks later, I think they found her body. And I know that the FBI, well, I should say I have heard that the FBI did contact my grandparents, my grandpa, and actually I think he showed up at the door. An FBI agent showed up at the door, and because they felt the same way. This is a little bit weird. These are two close family members that have both vanished and maybe murdered, and but that's all I know. Nothing else came of it. No other. I've actually contacted the FBI myself about my mom's case, and this is in this last year sometime, but I've gotten zero response from that. So, but that's all I really know. I know that there's been a few odd type things that have happened over the years besides that, with a nephew. That is a really odd story as well. I kind of feel like I shouldn't tell that story because it's not my story to tell, but there's been a few people that have just up and kind of went away. And then this other person I'm talking about is actually alive and well and just fine. So, but nobody in the family knew where they were. It just seems like there's a little bit of a ability to make people disappear maybe in our family, which again was not the grandpa I knew, but I knew that guy was there because I had heard enough growing up that the power that my grandpa had was very big, and people were to have feared him back in the day. That's something I was made very aware of very young, but that was not the guy I knew, nor was, my own children did not know that guy, but clearly he was there.
Yeah. And you just you just brought in the next element that should have just shocked everybody. And we're not going to go into detail on that, but I think it's important to touch on it. And if you want to go into detail on it, you do that on your podcast. That's your voice. That's your family story. And I can really put detail out there like that, other than to sum it up. Prior to your mother's disappearance, your grandfather has made somebody else disappear in the family. Verified. Your mom was spotted in Hawaii, in an area that family has ties to. I think that gives a lot of credibility to your mother possibly have been sent away and could possibly be alive. Or I don't know. But I think that gives Jim's story a lot of credibility. They've done it before. And the circumstances behind the individuals that they made leave is just, yeah, it makes me want to cry. I don't even want to go, it's choking me up, but it's deep, it's very serious. And prior history of something like that is key. It's another red flag that's beyond a red flag. It shows previous pattern. It's all about pattern. That's a pattern.
And to me, it's a pattern of not just power, but the ability to do something and have nobody question you. So the power to, or the ability to do it, I think is one thing, but the ability to do these things and have nobody ask you questions. And I mean, nobody. I have sat with people in my family still to this day who will say to me, Jaime, nobody questioned Ray Anderson. No, you didn't question Ray Anderson. Of course, we didn't ask if how the investigation was going, or what happened to this individual that we're talking about. Nobody asked. You just assumed that Ray had it under control because you were not asking. That kind of control over people is pretty incredible. And especially since, honestly, I mean, yes, his fear was big for the time, I guess you can say, but when people think of power like that nowadays, it looks very different. And this is more, and I really hate to say it because my love for Jesus comes from my grandparents. So it almost feels warped to say that, and then to say that they did these things under the umbrella of religion. Yeah. But it's a cult-like situation when you take these people who are all strong, bold, wonderful individuals who would not question my grandfather no matter what, under people in his own home or family disappearing, and you were not going to question.
Yeah. Yep. And that ties into, now let's stick with this your mom's alive theory. This supports that because it shows a pattern of them making people disappear before. And this isn't just hearsay. Like I said, if you want to label that, if you want to get into those details on your podcast, do it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are going to go there begging you for that. That's on you to do. I'm not going to put that out there. Yeah. But it's shocking. It is very shocking. And it shows that they're capable of doing something like this. Even without labeling that, everybody just already thinks something. But hearing that is just takes this and just really messes the entire flow of everything. Right. But let's put some blinders on real quick and stay in that lane. It supports why there was a search and evidence found in an area that didn't make sense. It supports why your Uncle Ken, her brother, was there just packing a bag days after. And it supports also throw out there was a financial transaction that could have only been taken place by your mother after her disappearance. What was that?
In 1982, there was the name of it now is escaping me because you caught me off guard. It wasn't a bank account. It was
like a trust.
Yeah, trust. Thank you.
Yeah.
A trust opened by my mom to me in 1982. It was not a significant amount of money, Mind you, it's the same amount of money that was put in there then because they closed the account pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't know the exact number. I know it's over $100. That's what I know, but it's not like thousands of dollars or anything. But we have asked, we have sought, and so have a couple of retired detectives, PIs, have asked people in the banking industry in the 80s, have tried to get some sort of like, how would this happen without her doing this? And everybody says it's not possible. Everybody says she would have had to have walked into a bank. She would have had to have given money. She would have had to have shown her ID of some kind to prove who she was because of what she was opening, not just a bank account, where back then it was a little bit more loose. It was not a bank account. It's a specific account. And she would have had to have shown them information to start this trust and then make it care of me, her daughter, which is what it is.
Those are all things that don't make sense, don't add up, that support this theory. What else can you draw on that would support this theory? But what else would this theory create clarity for? If you want to assume that's legit and that you know she really was sent away, do you really think your mother was in a position to be forced away? Do you think they really had the power to control the probably one of the most independently minded women in the entire family and community at that time? Do you think that was possible?
Yes. And I don't say that lightly. There was a time in my life when I was younger. I'll never forget it because I'll never forget the thought coming to my head. Oh my gosh, I understand. I truly believed until I don't even know how old. Now I'm confused, but I truly believed till not too many years ago, hands down, that my mom was alive. I don't know why. I can't tell you why. There was nothing that made me think that. I don't even know that it was false hope because I've made this comment and statement before. That's truly the worst case scenario for me because I did not have a good childhood. I had a hard childhood, and my dad raised me with my stepmom, and that's ugly. That's ugly. And the worst case scenario for me is that she basically gave up and said, you know what, it doesn't matter. I can't battle through this enough to be there for my daughter and raise her. I'm not saying, that makes her sound like a quitter, and that's not what I'm saying. But there was a time in my life that I said to myself when I was young and I had a little boy, and he was now 30. But when I said, you know what, this battle is all I can fight through right now. And I was sitting in front of my computer and I said to myself, oh my goodness, I get it.
Yeah.
I had a moment of clarity that said to me, if she's alive out there, this moment I have to remember because I get it. I understand what it's like to grow up in the wrong way, and be led astray or not correctly, and to not be grown up enough yet to fight back certain battles, and not know how to protect myself quite yet, and not be articulate enough to explain what I feel or need, and to just feel like going away might be better for my child. However, it's still the worst case scenario for me. So there's not a lot that I can fathom or find reason to say that I would do that. But what I can say is when my grandfather was controlling my narrative for a very short time in my life as an adult, that I felt like I was 100%. And I mean, this is a man who I respected everything about him, but I was trapped in this little box and I couldn't get out without his help. I needed him. And I went, oh boy, yeah, she could have walked away from this. She could have been trapped by something at that time. She could have felt like the only way for me to live a normal life was for her not to be here for some reason. She had told people, she had made the comment within weeks of her disappearing to multiple people, if something happens to me, do not let my mom and dad raise you. That has been documented by at least 3 people, and that she was best friends with, if not more. Do not let my grandparents raise my daughter. You make sure Jaime goes with Randy. Multiple times. So
Randy is your dad.
Randy's-
We haven't talked much about your dad. Your dad's a great guy.
yeah.
There's no sense in even going in that direction because So that's the first time somebody has heard his name. So I just want to clarify that. That's key. This is like one of the first moments in your life where you realize, wow, like some things aren't what I thought they were, and in a vulnerable moment, and I'm sure probably arguably one of your most vulnerable moments in your life, he tried to do some things that just weren't nice, and that's tough. That is very tough to go through.
Yes, and I can tell you that I can, without a shadow of a doubt, picture my grandfather saying to my mother that the lifestyle that you are living is not appropriate for a child, and we're going to take her. I can tell you that's one of the few areas that I can see him. I say few is not the right word. That's one of the places I can see him going. I can see it to impact her, to say about your daughter and putting it back on her, like, you are making all these bad choices. You are not a good mother. You are not doing a good job. Mm-hmm. And I will take her from you. And at that moment, I can see her absolutely saying, okay, this is not worth it. This is not going to work.
Switch gears. Pacific Northwest, late 70s, young, beautiful young woman, according to the public narrative, walks away from a dance, never seen again. There's several serial killers that are in play during this period of time. And that's been something that's been a part of your mom's case. What was she a victim of Gary Ridgway, the Green River killer, who's confessed to killing 80 plus women? Only, I believe, 30 or so have ever been found whatsoever. But that's a lot of women that he killed in that area. He targeted women later on in his killing spree, which were working women. So it doesn't fit the narrative of your mom. Didn't fit the narrative early on. He didn't develop targeting sex workers until, way later on. I know he was brought to King County, several years ago, in regards to, some new interrogations and some DNA stuff and so forth. And then your mom's case came back into light, and the Gary Ridgway talk. What do you know about that? Do you want to discuss that, or?
Sure. In early 2000 maybe, we got 2001. I got a phone call. It's the only time King County has ever contacted me. I've never been contacted by them, but I got a phone call from King County, a detective who said, "This is who I am, and I am a detective on the Gary Ridgway case, and we are hoping to get some DNA from you because there are several unidentified bodies in the Gary Ridgway case, and we would like to, they could match your mom's description essentially, and we would like to get DNA." I immediately got them in contact with my grandparents, as my grandpa was already sick at the time, but I also knew that would be the best DNA match. So they did get my grandma and grandpa's DNA at that time. It never came of anything. I will also say the thing about Gary Ridgway that was interesting was that he actually knew my mom's name when he saw her picture. That did not shock anybody because apparently he was very well versed in all of the, in this area, missing person type cases. Apparently that was kind of his passion. But that did happen, and it went away pretty quick. Never even heard that she didn't match. Didn't get a phone call or anything that she didn't match. I just clearly assumed that was the case. He has been extensively interviewed, as most people would know, after what he has confessed to. And he has been interviewed about my mom and has denied any involvement. And it is a little early for him, and it doesn't fit his profile, the in-depth profile and this is also from people not just at King County that have interviewed him that I've spoken with, say that it does not match for him. Just a side note.
when your mom disappeared, he was in his second marriage,
Yes.
and he had a child in that marriage. Anybody who knows the Green River killings, the killer and his story and everything that we're laying out in regards to him and a lot more, knows that he never admitted to killing anybody or starting that early, which were a couple of years prior to when he started, or at least he's admitting to starting. I believe I fully believe he was killing way before when he has told law enforcement he started. I believe it's to protect his second marriage. You just don't start killing like that. You don't he did not start killing when they believe he started killing. Just didn't happen. I believe he's trying to protect his wife. He's trying to protect his kid, and he just has some weird moral thing that he's protecting there.
Yes.
Do I believe that he has done something to your mom's case? I think it's a stretch, just like everybody else believes.
Yeah.
There's nothing really there to draw on, but it's a possibility, as well as several other serial killers. A lot of people want to throw Ted Bundy out, but Ted Bundy was locked up. He did operate in Seattle in the 70s, but he was gone by the time your mother disappeared. So he's not there's been a lot of confusion in other platforms and people who tried to tell your mom's story about Ted Bundy, and it's just something attractive to talk about. And they're not putting out accurate.
Ted Bundy name get a lot of people pay attention to that. So he was in jail in Florida. So
and I've spent time in Seattle with you. I've spent very personal time at where she disappeared in that parking lot. I personally walked the street they said she walked, and that's just something that I do. And it hasn't changed hardly at all in 46 years. And I'm gonna tell you right now, that's not where that's not somewhere random you go to get a girl. That is not where something random happens. Is it possible? Obviously, yes, you can make that argument, but it's just not. It's not somewhere that happens. It's a very nice area.
It is.
And I believe, like you believe, that she never left that parking lot, and nobody saw anything. So that means she had to have left with somebody she knew, or left without anything happening. There was no commotion or anything. And then we're also to remind everybody that the police department is in this parking lot. This is another reason you're not going to target this area. It's the worst place to do anything like that. So
there's a lot of open businesses at this time still, right? It's there's a restaurant upstairs. It is not it's not hiding in some shadows somewhere. Not that things don't happen in those places. I'm not saying that. It just the odds are a little bit lower that there's going to be some big commotion and nobody sees this. It doesn't make any sense. There's people coming smoking. This was smoking, right? People are coming all around these buildings, and it was a very used space at that time.
Yeah, and there's what's the other guys? Stanley Burnson, who was killing at that time, and a couple others. But there's just it just doesn't add up. Doesn't add up at all. I don't believe that any of those killers had anything to do with your mom's case. I believe that it's closer to home than anybody would have ever thought. I really do. That's what it points to. There's a lot of other stuff that obviously we can't talk about. It makes it really hard. And people are probably listening to this. They're probably like, "What do you mean? Like, how much more is there?" Like, there's. You're gonna get your answers, and you're gonna be the reason why. This is gonna be the reason why. What do you hope comes from this? Like, what in your mind, what is obviously finding your mom, right? But like, somebody's watching this. They know something. Like, what do you have to say to the people who are going to watch this that know something?
Now you're gonna make me cry. Thanks. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, there's a 2-year-old little girl who lost the life she was supposed to have then, and I am blessed and I have an amazing life now, but there is a lot of history and time that was left that day, and I deserve answers and my kids deserve answers. And there's a 24-year-old woman that day that has only now been remembered, and very minimally at that, for being a disappearing act and not for who she was. And I feel like I know that she deserves to be remembered differently, and by the life and by the life that she gave to somebody. And I would like that to be what you think about when you go to bed and you decide that you're not going to say what you know one more time, because now's the time to say something and come forward and give some relief to family and friends before they pass away.
You're going to win the hearts of everybody watching this, and rightfully so. And that means support. Where can people come support you at?
We have a podcast, Breaking the Ice Cold Case Files, is on every platform that you need it to be on. And you can follow us pretty closely on Where is Barbara McClure on Facebook and Instagram, and working on TikTok. Not as good at that yet. But we release about every 10 days or so new podcasts. The last one was the first half of the interview with Scott Steepleton, the guy she was with the night she went missing. So it's getting pretty interesting to talk to these people who were by her side that night.
There you guys have it. Go make sure you connect with her podcast. And you guys have to also understand that this is a learning curve. This is also her journey, her life that is playing out within this in real time. So there's going to be things that come out in layers. There's going to be things that might not come out as this progresses, but put pressure. Pressure is deserved in this case. And that happens because you guys need to share this. You guys need to talk about this case. If you're in the Seattle area and you're connected to anybody that was in the Lake Forest Park area that went to King's with Barbara when she went to King's school, or went to Westgate Chapel or Philadelphia Church, or worked with her at the hotel, the Olympic Hotel downtown, like, we need to hear from you. Like, you need to come forward. Even if you think you don't know anything, that's respectively, that's not up for you to decide, because it's the little things in a case like this that really do mean something. It's the things that you think don't mean anything that mean something. Absolutely. So don't come to that decision on your own. Let Jaime, let myself, let King County or somebody else that's connected on a level that can get things done make that decision. And
I think one of my asks, Doug, that I've never asked out loud actually, but people were at that Fandangos that night. It was not just those 6 people or whatever that were there. There are other people there. So if you saw something that night, that in that parking lot, somebody has to remember. Somebody saw something there.
Yeah, absolutely. And most importantly, if you live in Kihei, if you have history there, absorb this. Start looking around. Start remembering who you know or who is there now. We have some up to date, like, progressive images of what she could possibly look similar to. Obviously it's not accurate, but she could very well be on the island or was on the island and could be out there. That's if anybody in Hawaii knows something, knew her, and can support that in any way whatsoever. Maybe she's under a different name, completely different identity. It's extremely possible. Absolutely possible. It's so easy to do back then. You could just up and leave and assume another identity and, be forced to have left your life. And the Hawaiian community needs to take a hold of this and dig into it. No matter where this goes, it's unfortunate, but that is a better outcome, you know what I mean, than any of the other narratives that we can conclude. It's really important that everybody goes and follows you and gets connected to your case and your mom's story, so that if they want to share it, if they want to follow it, they can do so. Is there anything else that you want to add to this? Is there anything that we haven't covered? You know what? If we haven't covered it, don't worry about it. They can go follow you to learn about it.
No, Doug, I just want to thank you. It means a lot to me. And I know that you have, some personal ties to something similar to this, but the fact that you've picked this up and truly feel it with me and go through it with me is really special to me, because there's been very few of those. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I'm not just sitting here on a chair. There's a lot that's, we're not going to talk about any of that stuff publicly. But you're very welcome. And anything that we can do to support you any step of the way whatsoever. I mean, you got it. And this is your year. This is your mom's year. 46 years too late, but it's never too late.
Now or never, right? And now's okay. I'll take it.
Yeah. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
That's it. All right. Thank you, Jaime.
Thank you.